Hey there, history fans. The war is over, the colonists have won, and the United States of America has just begun. This is Huggins History, and here we go. Now that the colonists have created their new country, they've got to create a new government. And so, this is all about the United States Constitution. But, did you know that the US Constitution was not the first attempt at government? No, it was not. See, this new country, these new Americans, started out with what's called the Articles of Confederation. It was the first written plan of government for the United States. And the problem is, the Articles of Confederation, they were weak. They were like a rope of sand. Think about how strong a rope of sand would be. Pretty weak, it just crumble, right? The Articles of Confederation were about as effective as just that, a rope of sand. So, why was it so weak? Well, it created a weak national government that could not collect taxes. And the way governments work and how they provide services for you and me is through tax money. And all they can really do is go to those states and say, hey, Georgia, can we have some money? Oh, no? Okay. Hey, New York, can we have some money? No? Ah, shoot. Hey, how about you, Massachusetts? Oh, thanks for a little bit of donation there. Thanks for those taxes. Maryland? No? Okay. That's really all they could do was ask politely for taxes. With no money, they couldn't get very much done. So, a group of delegates from the states decided to get together and discuss these Articles of Confederation. And what they decided here in this building, this is called the Philadelphia State House, now it's called Independence Hall. What they decided here was, these Articles of Confederation are weak. We need to get rid of them and start over completely. So, 55 delegates, 55 delegates from 12 states decided to get together and discuss these Articles of Confederation. They met right here in this room. You can see the seats. And they chose George Washington, the war hero from the Revolutionary War, George Washington, to be their president of the convention. He sat right up here in this chair. That is the actual chair that he sat in. And the rest of the delegates sat out here as they discussed this new government. So when these guys all got together, they said things like, oh, I am chuffed to bits to be here today. It is my pleasure to be in your company, Dr. Franklin. Hey, it would have been dim of me not to have been here. Hello, Governor. Pip, pip. I'm heartily glad to see you, Mr. Hamilton. Blimey! Surprise! It's good to see you again, Mr. Sherman. Long trip. I'm absolutely knackered. Whew! Once they got all those pleasantries out of the way, they got down to business in what's called the Constitutional Convention. And what they decided was get rid of those Articles of Confederation. They decided to throw them out and start over completely. Now they had to make lots of compromises to get this government that we have today. A compromise is when both sides kind of meet in the middle, they discuss, and they both get something they want, but they don't get everything they want. So they had to make some compromises. So what is a constitution? Well, a constitution is just simply a written plan of government, a written plan that provides the basic framework for a government. And lots of places have them. Up there you can see the Japanese Constitution, the Constitution of India. Even my fantasy football league has a constitution where we lay out all of the basics and we explain how that entity or that group is going to be governed. And so they decide we're going to make a constitution for this new country. First, they create the preamble, an introduction to what is going to be said in this Constitution. The preamble says those three words you see right there, we the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. That is the preamble to the Constitution. There's a great song about it. You can go and check it out if you want to memorize it. Well, some of the decisions and compromises that needed to be made were really complicated. And as you probably know, coming up with a compromise is difficult. We have trouble deciding if that dress right there is blue and black or if it's gold and yellow. We can't decide if this right here is a duck or if it's a rabbit. We can't decide what this sound is.
Laurel. Laurel, 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 laurel.
We can't even decide which One Direction member is the best. Obviously, it's Harry. So, When they're going to have to make these decisions and these compromises, you can imagine those 55 delegates are going to have lots of arguments. One thing they can decide on, though, is no kings. They do not want any kings with a crown ruling this country. And the states need to be represented. This is a united states. And those states are going to work together, and they all need to be represented in this new federal government. Okay, so how can we make sure that we don't create a king? It's not that hard of a deal, right? You take King George III, and you just, or this way, I guess, King George III, and you just split him up into 3 parts, right? Take his power and divide it up 3 ways. That's one way we can make sure we don't create a king. So those 3 parts are going to be split into what are called the 3 branches. 3 branches of government. Okay, we've got the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch. And each of those branches are going to do a separate job to govern our country. Okay? So let's kind of see what those 3 branches are and what their main powers are. In the blue squares here, rectangles, you can see what their main job or role is. For the legislative branch, their main job is to make the laws. They write the laws, they debate the laws, they discuss the laws, they argue over them, and they decide on them. Okay, they make the laws. The number 1 job of the executive branch is to enforce the laws, to make sure that those laws are followed. And the 3rd branch, the judicial branch, their job is to interpret the laws, decide what the meaning of those laws really is, and how people will be held accountable or punished. You can see there's a bunch of other jobs over here that each of those branches do. For instance, legislative branch, they hold all the money. They decide how money is going to be spent. It's not the president that does that, it's the legislative branch. So you can see some of those other powers. You can't really see right here behind the judicial branch. Let me clear that out here. There we go. Alright, so you can see the rest of the judicial branch as well. Okay, so how will the states be represented in Congress? This was a pretty complicated decision. Back in 1790, this is what the populations of the states looked like. You can see Virginia had the largest population of all the states. Pennsylvania came in a very distant second, and you get North Carolina, Massachusetts, and Maryland. And so each of those states had their own goals in how the states would be represented in the government. So, for the legislative branch, they decide, here's what we'll do. Our primary job is to make the laws. Our lawmaking body is called Congress. And they decided they're going to have 2 parts to Congress. You can see here the House of Representatives, and over there is going to be the Senate. They're held in the same building. It's called the Capitol Building. That's in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Capitol. All right, so Congress, what is this? It's the legislature. It's a group of people that are going to make the laws. What do I mean when I say 2 houses? Well, they decide they're going to have 1 house, the House of Representatives, based on population. The more people you have, the more representation you get. Okay? That makes the large states happy. States like, for instance, Virginia here, right? They're going to be really happy with the House of Representatives because they're going to get more representatives. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, they will also be happy with the House of Representatives. But the Senate is going to be based on equal representation. Every state gets the same amount of senators. It's going to end up being 2. Okay? And that's going to make the small states happy. States like Rhode Island, and Georgia, and Delaware, and New Hampshire that thought that maybe they would get outwitted, that they would get outpowered. And so this is how they decided to do this. Roger Sherman is the great compromiser. He's the one that came up with this idea of splitting the power of the legislative branch into 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. It was a great compromise. Okay, so if every state gets 2 senators, and right now we have 50 states, that's going to equal 100 U.S. senators. For the House of Representatives, that number has continued to grow as more and more states have existed. Right now, there are currently 435 members of the House of Representatives, and that number is going to depend on the population. Minnesota, the state that I'm from, has 8 representatives based on our population. All right, so Minnesota is split up into these 8 congressional districts. And even though this 8th district and this 7th district are really large, the same amount of people, roughly, live in that area as live in District 3 and District 5 and District 4. This is Minneapolis and St. Paul. As you can see here in this blow-up, these areas right here have the same population as District 7 and District 8. Okay, so 8 representatives for those 8 districts. The House of Representatives across the United States looks like this. As I already pointed out, Minnesota has 8, so does Wisconsin. But you can quickly glance at this and see how large the populations are, or how large the number is. Can you tell which state has the largest population? You got it, California. Second largest? Texas, you got it. 53, 36. Other large states would be Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, etc. Okay, so in the House of Representatives, those large states get more representatives. In the U.S. Senate, it's the same. Every state, no matter how large you are physically and how many people you have in the population, it's 2 senators. That's a given. All right. So when we take all of the senators, 100, all of the representatives, 535, 435, that adds up to 535 legislators in our country making laws for all of us. Okay. That then plays into how we decide how do we vote for president, which was another compromise that had to be made during the Constitutional Convention. They decided to create something called the Electoral College. And we'll explain this more in another video. It's kind of complicated, but for now what you just need to know is that the Electoral College, the number inside of each of these states is the number of senators, in Minnesota, 2, and the number of representatives, 8, adds up to 10 electoral votes. Minnesota is worth 10 electoral votes. So when a candidate is running for president, they go to Minnesota, they try to win the votes in Minnesota, and whichever candidate gets the most votes in Minnesota gets all 10 of our electoral votes. Same thing in all of the states, and whichever presidential candidate gets this number right here, 270, ding, they're the winner, they become the president. Okay, we'll talk more about the Electoral College and how president is elected, but that was decided during the Constitutional Convention. Okay, let's go over to the executive branch. You can see way over there, you see that piece of King George? That's the second piece of the power. The executive branch, its main job is to enforce the laws. And there's really one person in charge of this branch. The President of the United States is the head of the executive branch. Now, the President can't do all the work by herself. The President needs lots and lots of people to help do all this work. So, the President selects a cabinet, all kinds of advisors, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of people are appointed by the President to do all this work in the executive branch. Other responsibilities include signing or vetoing bills that are passed by Congress, negotiating treaties, and the President is the Commander-in-Chief of the military. The President also cannot declare war. The President cannot declare war. Who has that power? Congress does. Congress is the one that can declare war. And the last thing about the President and the executive branch that I want to talk about here is really the President is supposed to be a role model for all Americans. The President is the leader of this country. The President is the face of this country. And the President has the responsibility to be a positive role model for all Americans and to represent all Americans. That is the job of the President and the executive branch. The third branch, the judicial branch. It is made up of the Supreme Court, which currently consists of 9 justices. Now, the judicial branch was created in the Constitution to just be a set of courts. The United States Supreme Court is the one that was created, but lots of other courts do exist across this country. The Supreme Court, though, is just the Supreme Court, the top court in the country. And it currently consists of 9 Supreme Court justices. Those Supreme Court justices they serve for life. They get the job for life. How are they chosen? Well, we don't vote for them. We vote for a president. And the president then appoints those justices if there is an opening. How will there be an opening? Well, if they get the job for life, that means there'll be an opening if they die. Yeah. They also could retire, give up the job, decide to go off and, go fishing or play golf or, get into sewing or something like that. So they can decide to quit or retire, but they serve for life if they choose to, and then the president appoints the new Supreme Court justice. So they interpret the laws and they decide arguments about the laws. So when the laws are created by the legislative branch, then sometimes those laws go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides what those laws really mean. And they only look at laws that are brought to them in the courts. They don't deal with murders and theft. They deal with really big constitutional issues. like our freedoms of speech and our rights to bear arms and those types of things. Okay, so you can see way over there, there's the third part of King George III. So at this Constitutional Convention, this one right here, those delegates, and George Washington, as you see right above me, those delegates got together. They went through a whole bunch of compromises in 1787, and by the end of that hot summer, they decided that their work was done. They signed that U.S. Constitution, and they decided that they're going to take that Constitution back to their states to get it ratified, meaning it needed to be approved by the states. It was hard work. Man, it was hard work. It was hot. It was dark. It was closed in. It was stuffy. They're wearing those ruffs and their high water pants there, their breeches, you see their tall socks. They're wearing those powdered wigs. They were arguing with each other, a bunch of smart people, a bunch of really rich people that are used to having their way. They got together and they were able to negotiate a constitution for this whole country. So they took that constitution back to the states, and the states had to decide whether they were going to approve of it or not. By the end of 1789, all the states had approved of this constitution, and it went into play. So as these guys were getting ready to leave Philadelphia, they said things like, "Cheerio, old chap, brilliant! And it's time for me to clear off." And guess what, everybody? It is time for me to clear off. Thank you for listening today. This is History Huggins, and this was your U.S. Constitution. Peace.